Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery. You can see over here on the bench I've got a little bit of food set aside. What I've got going on is a quick check-in on my two oldest systems. They both run European night crawlers. All the numbers are so fresh in my mind for some reason. They're easy to remember. The oldest bin is 25 weeks old, and a week right behind it by one more week is a 24-week-old. Another European night crawler system. They're not the same because besides the week difference, this system is already far along enough that I started the migration of the worms out of the finished compost. What I usually do prior to that is what this bin here is doing, which is foraging. This thing's been foraging for a couple weeks now since we last checked in on it, or at least since we last fed it. I think it's been 12 days since we last checked in on it, so it's been sitting here foraging. This one started its migration 1 week ago today, and we're hoping that, it's making good progress. So we're here to see how that's coming along, and the food is there to just help me reinforce the migration by adding to the feeding zone to make sure that we give all the worms in there a good incentive to move out. So I'm going to get these up on the bench and we can get started. So we're beginning here in the bin that's foraging, the younger of the two systems. And I guess for me the decision point on when to end the foraging and start migration is dependent on how nicely the material in the bin's coming along. And after only a couple weeks, I would imagine that I'm probably in store for finding material that still needs some breaking down before we could consider calling it a done deal. I think that's kind of what we're already seeing here. You can see one worm caught up inside the bubbles of the bubble wrap. Maybe I'll just fold the soiled surface inside, maybe preserving the moisture long enough that they don't wig out, even though the bright lights might make them a little bit uncomfortable. See, a good number of worms are hanging out here beneath the bubble wrap where the moisture's recirculating. The plastic does a good job holding that moisture down in the bin. Around the edges where we have a little bit of airflow around the sides of the plastic, where there's no cover, the stuff's a little bit drier but not too dangerous. I guess one thing we could do, as long as we're in here anyway, maybe we can collect this stuff up a little bit and just get it somewhere closer, I don't know, to the middle where it's going to be covered in plastic, so it can dampen a little bit, see a little bit of breakdown as opposed to just sitting there. That's probably the only thing I really intended to do here in this check-in. I mean, obviously, look at the material. A lot of times these sticks and stems are a big time gauge for me, at least, to let me know how I'm coming along. Not sure if that's like a banana stem or asparagus or something. This might just be a piece of cardboard. I don't know. Certain things might not be expected to break down. Other things, little fragments of leaves and stuff, you would like to think that they're going to get broken down. And naturally, all these sticks and stems would be really nice to see them broken down further too. So I think foraging in here can certainly continue. It does seem like the material's coming along really nicely. The moisture level feels just right, I think. I don't know, maybe we can just create a little bit of a gully to place those collected fragments of dry material down into. Maybe it'll help with the breakdown process. Yeah, look at all that dry stuff. Yay, moisture. I think it's kind of inevitable. It's just going to happen unless you got like a... Not really though. I mean, yeah, if you got a system that's got a lid, that should keep the moisture level throughout the whole system. Out on the edges everywhere, pretty much consistent. But if you have no lids, kind of like me, then the plastic is the next best thing, I suppose, for keeping moisture down within the system, not letting it all escape to evaporation. Alright, things look nice in here. Just going to let it continue as is. Large chunk. I mean, this is, sometimes I wonder about, do I want to keep large chunk items like that in a bin that's foraging, because I'd like to see them working on stuff like this that I wouldn't want to have to pull out. But if I had to pull anything out, I could see myself pulling out a large chunk of avocado peel or whatever, skin. So I don't know. It's kind of a loosey-goosey approach that I take here sometimes. Maybe I could be a little bit more focused on results. Sometimes I just want to see how things go on their own without me having to micromanage. All right, let's get this thing covered back up. How about these little guys? Did they stay on the plastic? 1, 2, 3. Looks like they stayed kind of put. We'll get them covered back up, restore the darkness and peace so that they can continue. And it looks like they're doing a really nice job, but I got a feeling that this is going to have to go on for a little while longer. I wonder how much longer it's going to take, so we'll see. Okay, let's get the other system out here. So here, within the older of the two systems, where the worms are already migrating now for a week, I'll explain our arrangement. We've got a side of it here where the food and the moisture is with the plastic, forcing the recirculation of the moisture. Here is where the finished castings and the worms were. The whole idea by leaving this covered with only paper is that it's going to dry a little bit over time, possibly making it a little bit less appealing for the worms to remain in. So I guess if we give this stuff a good inspection, we can at the same time pick out any stuff that seems like it would be better off down in the feeding area. So I think we could start with that, and then at the end we can just drop in the food replenishment that I brought along. Looks like we've already got ourselves a couple worms hanging out here on the top surface. They're gonna flee because of the bright lights, but we'll see what we could do about making this check-in quick and painless. So this stuff out here, it's a little bit dry. I don't know, does it matter what I do with it? I guess probably not. It has a really dark cocoon. It's so weird, it's like all I'm seeing is like cocoons everywhere. There's a really dark cocoon right there. There's a one right there, one right there, one right there. One right there. Holy cow, what's going on here? I see one right there, I believe. There? Holy, that's interesting. I don't know why, but suddenly, all of a sudden, I just looked down and there they are. I don't know if it was just a coincidence or if that's kind of an indication of what's going on in this bin throughout. Slightly lighter colored one, I believe, right there. A couple of them right next to each other right there. Wow. That's pretty interesting. I guess that kind of supports my whole theory about, you know, maintaining your finished casting collection, like what we're going to have here pretty soon after the worms move out, and not using it immediately in your garden or whatever, but keeping the stuff around to see what becomes of all those cocoons, you know? All right, really quick, I think we were just going to examine to see how the evac in here is progressing, right? Over here, really close to the plastic covered area, you might expect to find a few worms. Stuff is really fine. Moisture level seems okay. Yeah, not too dry out here, not too dry at all. Not bad at all. I think we saw a worm here. So we've encountered a worm. We might as well put them where we want them if we encounter a worm. I guess all the way here at the far edge, be interesting to see how things are progressing, or if we've still got holdouts insisting on staying all the way out here furthest away from the fresh food and the fresh moisture recirculating, and right away we do have another taker. I wonder if it's because of this piece of seed that was left behind in the material. Here again, we'll just help these little guys over to where we want them to be. If we bump into any, or if we bump into large chunks of food. So maybe that was just kind of the one oddball. Wasn't paying attention when the memo went out about the new feeding area. I think I just saw another worm, but we're not going to go picking through the whole batch just keep spotting cocoons. It's really cool. So we're just going to kind of acknowledge the fact that this material still has occupants. Gosh, cocoon right there, everywhere. Stuff is loaded with cocoons. Really nice. And here's another chunk of avocado pit. So I'm not going to go on a crazy thorough search for worms, but if we do look, we do find them. So we're going to give them a little bit more time to continue down over into the feeding area, which is not only all about the food, but it's all about the moisture too. The plastic that we took off earlier is creating that kind of moisture lock, preventing the moisture that's down in here from evaporating away. It feels nice in here, moisture level. Yeah, there's a good number of I could sort of almost hear them even before I felt them. You can hear them kind of squirming around in here. So I don't remember what we used to build this up with last time as far as feeding goes. Oh, what's this little guy doing out here draped over the wall? Yeah, the might have been the same stuff we're giving them today, more pumpkin. Might have been some coffee. But it does seem like they've done a really good job breaking down whatever it was, because I'm having a hard time. Oh, spoke too soon. I always seem to speak too soon, but yeah, we have found some leftovers here. Not many. Little bits and pieces of what we used to build up our feeding area. Looks like a really nice, popular spot that the worms are enjoying. Good number of worms appear to have turned out for this feeding area. And it almost, geez, I gotta tell you, it almost feels like we could do a relocation of worms today into a new bin, launch off a new bin with all these little guys, and then, you know, and then reset to get this thing going for the last few stragglers that are still out there in the castings. I mean, some people might even say, geez Louise, dude, what do you got? You got maybe a dozen worms that are still hanging out in the finished castings. What about those, you know, 1,000 that you're already handling in the feeding area? Why not get them situated in a new home instead of being cramped up in your feeding area? Well, I don't know. Geez, that would be kind of neat if we actually did see an entire worm population more or less exit a batch of their finished castings in only a week. I mean, we would have set a new record if that was the case. I don't know. I think it's just got a lot to do with, you know, how the old stuff is coming along. I guess we're going to use some of my not so aged bedding today, because I just kind of replenished the supply, and the brand newest stuff is right out here on top, so it just hasn't had the benefit of sitting around for a long time and becoming really cozy, comfortable stuff. I mean, it's been soaking, so it's damp, but it just doesn't have, probably doesn't have the kind of microbe infiltration that the older stuff's got in it from having kind of been sitting here and seasoning in advance of it being used. So in here we're gonna, I guess we could start off by dropping in a little bit of the coffee that we brought along. Maybe about half of it. See if I can blend that in a little bit with this fresh bedding that we just dropped in. Not bad. I think I'm going to put this stuff right up against the wall, since I've got sort of a little bit of a insulation barrier here with that fresh bedding that we just dropped in. I didn't want to place these large frozen chunks of food right up against any worms directly. Any ones that are nearby that feel the cold and don't like it have the option to pull away. Okay, so we've definitely increased the size of our feeding area here by some. Let's drop in the rest of this coffee that's over here. Guess my only concern about having this food right up against the edge is that I don't have a good cover for it, and I'm not a big fan of leaving foods exposed to the air, possibly, you know, having passerby insects or whatever perceive that as sort of a dinner bell. Maybe if I could just use this filter to kind of cover it up right up against the wall, provided a little bit of protection from any curious little passerby insects that might catch a whiff of it in here. And try to get this thing covered up nicely. And at least we've also slightly increased the size of the feeding area so they don't feel crowded, don't feel compelled to maybe leave, want to go back over into the finished castings. I don't know, I find that to be extremely hard to believe that they would want to go back into there if you think about it. Alright, there was just one worm I saw there on the surface, so I brought the little guy over, and I guess we're going to let this continue, but it doesn't seem like we're going to need a whole lot more time, right? 7 days, pretty good results already on this horizontal migration in the Euro container. I mean, if we came back in here in 1 week and we actually did harvest these castings and consider this migration as complete after 14 days, I believe that would set a new record down here in my wormery. I don't know. I almost bring that up as a gag because it's just kind of funny that I even track it that way, but I do believe that 15 days is the recently broken record for a worm population in my wormery to move out of their finished castings over into the feeding area that I've created for them. And I somehow always keep looking back to my best performing results to see if I can ever break that as, you know, my house record. And it certainly seems very doable here, if you ask me. I don't know. Got a little bit of filth on my hands. I got a couple things to put away. But before I get into that boring stuff, let me just really quickly say thank you. Thanks so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please remember to leave me a thumbs up. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel too. That's really appreciated as well. All right, everyone. Have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye.